Hi guys! Welcome to Girls Gone Woke, where we inspire you to live a more conscious and joyful life. I'm Monica.
And I'm Claire. We're so grateful to have you here and bring you along on this journey with us.
Let's get started! Yay! Hey Bestie!
Hi, Bestie! In our matching sweaters.
I know, always matching. Soul sisters.
Soul sisters. Monny came up with this good topic idea, which I honestly haven't even thought about to talk about really, but I feel like maybe a lot of people who aren't diabetic can't really relate to having diabetes, but they can relate to a lot of the tips and tricks that I use for when I'm having kind of a shitty day or a shitty time frame in my life where I'm just kind of feeling burnt out. So
today we're going to talk about living with a chronic disease. For Claire, it's type 1 diabetes. So I thought that for this episode, I would just interview her a little bit on how she copes with it, because I can't even imagine having to deal with something like that that's chronic.
Yeah, let's just jump right in.
I guess let's start with a little bit of background on like what type 1 diabetes is and like what age you were diagnosed.
Right. So type 1 diabetes, it's funny because there are a lot of misconceptions around it. A lot of people automatically assume that I have type 2 because that tends to be more popular. And that's related to a lot of people get it if they overeat or are overweight. So it's funny, people will be like, well, you don't look diabetic. And I'm always like, oh, well, okay then. Maybe don't say that next time, but it's okay. I'm not here to judge. So a lot of people they don't hear about type 1 as much, and there's still no cure for it. It basically is a chronic condition where my pancreas, to put it mildly, it just doesn't produce any insulin. And insulin, it's a hormone that it's needed to allow sugar to be entered into the cells to help produce energy. So when you don't have it, you just feel like absolute shit. And I mean, not to be vulgar, but if insulin didn't exist, like there would be no way I would be alive right now. Mm-hmm. So yes, type 1, it can be genetic, but they're still not sure how people get it. For me, to answer your question, Money, was about 3.5 when I was diagnosed, and it was kind of a shock because nobody in my family had it. So for me, the doctors weren't sure. I did have a pretty bad infection when I was 3. So they're not sure if maybe instead of my body attacking that infection, it attacked my organs. And so that's maybe why it just caused damage to my pancreas. But yeah, I was a really little girl when I was diagnosed. And I always say, it is kind of it's a blessing and a curse, because obviously I've had it my whole life when the technology wasn't to where it's at now. So I had to do everything very old school. But also, I didn't have to live a life where I wasn't diabetic. So really can't remember, and I don't know what it's like living on Earth being a human without it.
I guess it would be slightly easier having it that way versus being diagnosed in like middle school or something when you are used to not having it.
Right.
How have you coped with it? Like, did you go through like a denial phase at all?
Oh, for sure.
And I actually know that you did, because I've been friends with you and I have had some visits to the hospital with you.
Oh, trust me. Yes, I freaking have. My mom always says, oh, Claire, it was so easy when you were little because you were just so compliant and so good and not as stubborn as you are now. And I was like, oh, thanks, Mom. And it's all out of love. But when I was little, it was kind of a breeze, like, because I didn't have to control it. My parents did. So my poor mom and dad, my mom, when I first was diagnosed, my little sister Mia was 1 year younger than me, so 2.5. And then my mom was pregnant with my youngest sister, Elle. And she said the first like couple months were just a nightmare, but with anything, you just kind of figure it out. People are resilient. She's like, I knew I had to do this to keep you alive. And not to say we didn't have scares when I was little, because when I was little, it was harder to communicate when I was feeling like I was having a low or high blood sugar. But for the most part, it was all fine. Everything was good. And I had like my best friend was the nurse in the nurse's office growing up, because I would always walk there with my little juice box and whatever. But once I got older in middle school, when you start developing, like you're kind of going through some hormonal changes and just kind of going through the motions of growing up, I really struggled with it. And I think my problem was I just didn't talk about it. I internalized everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of pretend I didn't have it. And my mom would be so frustrated with me, and she'd be like, Claire, do you know what happens if you just let your blood sugar be controlled all the time? Like, you're not going to make it. And she was very blunt with me. And she's like, you're not going to make it to 40 if you keep just neglecting your blood sugar. Like, I'm terrified I'm going to walk in your room and you're not going to be breathing. But I think for me, also being not really a type A person, just being lackadaisical, that was a problem for me. And also just, I think that I did kind of go through periods where I was just burnt out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, because I didn't have any friends that were diabetic. I didn't know anybody who was diabetic. So I didn't know that that was common. I just kind of thought, well, I'm struggling, but I don't really know who to talk to, because I was also so terrible at the doctors. And I still feel so bad about this. This is so terrible. I can't even believe I'm admitting this. I
Say it.
probably went through 20 doctors, 20, because I was, like Monica said, she's been friends with me forever. I was just non compliant. I was. And
I mean, I get it though, because kids, I mean, me as a teen and even now, I can be so stubborn and rebellious. And it's one of
yeah,
those things where it's like, I don't want to have this. So I'm just going to pretend that it doesn't exist. And then
exactly.
it's like self sabotage, but it sucks because diabetes is something that you literally have to deal with every part of the day.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
can't even imagine.
And I think too, that's a really good point, Monty, because when I learned to cope with something as big as living with this like invisible illness, they call it an invisible illness because you literally look so normal. And I'm a normal human being, but like people
Yeah.
don't know I could be having a really bad low blood sugar, and you might not be able to tell, or I might feel like shit because I was up all night with not being able to control my blood sugar levels, and that's why I'm having kind of a bad day. It's interesting that you bring up the coping thing, because I do think I learned at a very young age to compartmentalize things. So, like, my diabetes issue was over here. My family was going through a lot of changes. So, I'd compartmentalize that over here. And that was my way, I think, of coping with it. And it's interesting because now that we're on this self awareness journey, I'm kind of able to understand why I did the things that I did and why I was so non-compliant now. But in the moment, I think it was just my way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot to unpack here, but for the most part, yes, I did have a lot of years of denial, and that led into college for me. And I still have moments of burnout, but I think it also is normal. And now I have a much better way. I've learned to cope with it better, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
it does. And that can be so hard too, especially I was thinking about this like in college. Like every college kid wants to go out and party and drink and be like carefree and live that carefree lifestyle. And like with diabetes, binge drinking like a normal college kid, not saying that that is a healthy thing to do, but I know you and I
Right.
both did it.
Yep.
It is so much harder to deal with when you have diabetes. Like I
Right.
feel like you would get drunk so much easier than me.
Or I'm
And
just a lightweight.
yeah, or just a lightweight, and
But
then your
no.
blood sugar would be all wonky
Yep.
after that.
And I remember the doctor when I was in high school, she was like, I'm not going to tell you not to drink because that's just me being naive. But
Yeah.
I am going to tell you, if you do drink, one, you're going to face a lot more danger. Just as far as if you drink too much and you pass out, you're obviously not able to use your brain to be able to give yourself the right amount of insulin. Or it's also known where when you're out drinking, you're not eating a lot. So your blood sugar will skyrocket. And then, like, so you'll think, oh shit, like I have to give a lot of insulin, but then you just drop straight down. And
Yes.
those lows are what's scary because those are what, like, the long term lows aren't as terrible for you as the highs, but the lows in the short term are what's dangerous because it could send me into a coma. So,
Exactly.
yes, and Monica, she's so like my bestie, came to visit me in the hospital in college. Do you remember that?
How could I forget it?
How can I forget it? And you walk in and you were like, Claire, what are you doing?
It's like, Claire, but you look so ill.
So I've been in DK twice now in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because they both happened when I was in college and on my own. And I do know I should have done better because I knew better, but you're also, that's like such an experimental phase in life where I felt like the first time I really was doing everything by myself. I didn't have anybody nagging me to check my blood sugar. My mom was always kind of that person who I leaned on, and she would be like, Claire, have you done it? Did you check it? Blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, in college, I was just really struggling my first year, even kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. So I was kind of just in this weird phase of I was being very neglectful of, once again, my insulin, was in denial about it, wasn't giving the amount that I needed. And I've talked on here before, I was also struggling with a lot of like eating issues. So I was losing weight like crazy and I was loving the results, loving them. So I didn't care if I felt like shit and my blood sugar was high. I would just not give insulin because I knew I was losing weight when I felt like that, which is like so sick to me now that I think back on that. But in the moment, I didn't care. I
Yeah,
was
I get it.
fitting to the jeans that I wanted to fit into. And ultimately, it led me into the ICU where they were really, really worried about me. Like, and in the moment, I couldn't even walk into the doctor's office. Like, my ex-boyfriend had to like physically carry me in because
But,
I was so weak. And so I was just literally doing all the wrong things.
well, I do think that's so normal to go through a phase like that, just because I have another friend who is also type 1 diabetic, and he went through like a very similar denial phase in college, where again, like, would never check his blood sugar, kind of like pretended like he didn't have it, ate junk, would go out drinking like a lot, which I mean, I did too, but it's just different when you have type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
So I do think that that is normal.
And I remember someone literally said to me once, and like I said, I am not sensitive to any of this. It's just funny to me. They were like, yeah, put some cinnamon in your coffee. And like, you probably, if you keep putting cinnamon in because it's an anti-inflammatory, you won't have to give insulin anymore. And I was just like, honey, please. I have been like, if that were the case, I would have been doing that years ago.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But it is funny. Like,
If
people just don't really
they don't
understand it.
understand. No,
Yeah,
they
which is
don't. Because the
fine.
huge focus in America right now is type 2 diabetes. What, I guess, was your transition phase from going to denial into like accepting it and being like, wow, I actually really do need to take care of myself and I want to like live a long, healthy life? Was
Yeah.
it like ICU experience that freaked you out or what?
Yeah. Sadly, the ICU experience didn't. I would, well, it did, but I ended in DK again. So,
Yeah. You're stubborn like me.
hell yeah. If I was going to go on to DK, it wasn't going to be once. It was going
Yeah.
to be terrible. I should not say that. But like, It's true. We're both stubborn,
We
powerful
are.
babies. I think for me, it was honestly when I started, well, we both started around the same time, but just speaking for myself, this personal journey of just like digging deeper, trying to live more presently. I It made me dig deep into a lot of issues that I had no idea I had. So it led me to going to see a therapist in college because, like Monty said, like what was my breaking point? I don't have a specific one, but I'd say I realized it when I started just realizing that I needed help. I think it was like a spiritual thing. I think this
Thank
person
you
was plopped into my life, or he
for your
basically
awakening.
saved my life. I was a little weirded out when I found out that my therapist was going to be a man because I just didn't know if I'd be able to relate to him at all or if I'd feel comfortable opening up to him.
Right.
And
I'd
it
feel
ended up being insane. We both were diagnosed with diabetes at 3.5. And I kind of filled him in more about just like my family history. We had the same birthday. His parents ended up getting divorced the same when he was, I don't remember my exact age. I think I was 22 and he was 22. So all
crazy.
of these parallels. And
Yeah.
there was something so comforting about him. He just let me talk and didn't say like, "Oh, this will happen to you." If he didn't like put any fear in me, he
Mhm.
literally just let me talk about it. And that was the first time that I ever like said out loud the things was like feeling around it. Like, yeah, I'm obviously scared for the future and maybe if my life will look a little different than somebody else, or like, yeah, I have a ton of sleepless nights. Like my blood sugar's all over the place and I'm scared about that and sometimes I feel like shit. Like he just let me vent. And
Yeah.
it was the best thing in the world because for the first time it was like off my chest. I felt lighter and I really had somebody who I could confide in about it. So that was like a big turning point for me. And then one thing to add on top of that, so after that, I really kind of jumped into it. I was like, wow, it's really nice to have somebody to relate to about this. So I started doing some volunteer work when I lived in the cities for JDRF. If you're not familiar, it's the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And they started asking me to speak at some of their events, which was amazing because I got to meet so many people in the same boat. And there's just something comforting about that.
Hmm.
And which led me to get to go to the gala where I got to speak with really cool people in the industry about like all these new technologies. And I don't know, it just got me really excited. And it for me, it will always be a life journey. Like it will always be something that I'll have a little struggle with because it just is what it is. I mean, it takes up a lot of space in my
Hmm.
brain. My doctor always says, like, people who are juvenile diabetic, it's kind of like having two full time jobs because one of them you're trying to keep yourself alive, and
Yeah.
then the other is whatever you have to do outside of the diabetes world. So that led me to just really open my eyes. I realized how negligent I was as a child, but I've also forgiven myself for that too because when you're just in the motion and going through it, there's usually a reason why you're
Hmm.
doing those things. So all of this self acceptance and journey has totally helped me with a lot of
Yeah. And I do think it's just so important. Like when you're going through like hard times, finding somebody to relate to. Because when, at least for me, if I'm going through something and I know that somebody else is going through the same thing and feels the same way, it
it.
instantly makes me feel better just knowing that I'm not alone.
Right. And I like don't want this to be all about like diabetes because there are so many parallels that you can take and put it in every
Not
aspect
disease.
of your life. Like we all
Literally, and
have our struggles.
yes.
So I don't want it to be like a poor me. Like I know every single person out there is dealing with something, is going through something. So yeah, just having a good support group, like Monty said, it really is important. Even having one good friend that you can just like talk to.
Right.
We always say how much better we feel after these two for
I know.
ourselves.
Yeah, seriously. I know technology has gotten a lot better with it. So now, what do you use right now?
Yeah,
That.
so I have a couple little contraptions, but my main one that I use is called a Dexcom. And it has been such a game changer for me because I'm still that stubborn little girl in there. I'm not quite ready to use the pump. But what the Dexcom is, it basically checks your blood sugar for you. It's this little contraption, and I put it on my lower stomach, and it checks my blood sugar for me every 5 minutes automatically.
That's wild.
So, and it's amazing because it goes straight to my phone.
Yeah.
So, I have, like, it has been such a relief, especially at night, because that's typically when my fear would come in, like, did I overcorrect? Did I give too much insulin? But it will literally send an alarm off if my blood sugar drops below, and I can set the number. I usually have it set to like 60. Normal for me is about like 80, in between 80 and 150. So if it goes below 60, it'll like set off a loud alarm, and it just gives me such a peace of mind. And the craziest part about it too is I can share my data with my boyfriend Tony or really anybody. So if I'm away, like if and I'm alone, it also gives me a peace of mind because I know Tony's also getting my numbers. So if there were ever an emergency, he would know. So it's really cool technology. It shows you your history. I think it keeps it up to 90 days, but then you can also save it to your computer, and it just like basically shows your trends. There are a couple different ones. There's like a Freestyle Libre. That's I've tried it also, and I used to put it on the back of my arm.
Yep, I remember
Just
that one.
kind of depends what your insurance would
Right.
cover. So far, I am just a personal preference. I've absolutely loved the Dexcom. It has been life changing for me. So yeah, all this technology is really, really cool. And like I
Hmm.
said in the beginning, there's no cure yet, but they're starting to come out with technology even where it's like it would be, oops, my hair. It would be like an external pancreas. So it would be able to basically be like a pancreas, but just stick on you like a Dexcom, and it would automatically give the insulin levels that you would need for what your blood sugar is.
Without you having to check it, because it would check it for you.
Yes.
Wow.
And that would be freaking
That would be,
amazing.
wow. I could see that coming like within the next 10 years.
I know. I will be first in line for that
Yes,
because
you will.
I know it would almost just be like my mind would free up. It would just give me so much more space to
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
other things. And
Wow.
obviously, the health thing, I would be so much healthier too.
I have noticed you have been, ever since your self-awareness thing, I feel like you have
Hmm.
been way more compliant.
Yes. I feel like I have been a lot more compliant just after doing all of this. But like I said before, it is such a life journey. I am a human being. I still have moments where I'm really, really busy at work and I'm like stressed about something and my insulin levels are going all over the place because like my hormones are off and I'm just worried. And I think the one piece of advice, and for whatever you're going through, is just to be gentle with yourself. With anything, with life, it kind of ebbs and flows, and there are always going to be changes. And for me, I found that just saying, Claire, it's okay. You're having a busy day. Like, yeah, your blood sugar was shit, but don't hold on to it. Just like we always talk about letting things go with anything, just accept it, let it go at the end of the day. And I always tell myself, like, there's nothing a good night's sleep can't fix because I always feel better the next day. So if you are going through something and you're just feeling really frustrated, try your best not to hold on to it because life is messy. There's going to be a lot of changes no matter what. And just ebb and flow with it, roll
Hmm.
with it. And it's so much better. My other tip would be when you start your day, start it, just obviously be grateful. I always say, thank God I'm living now where for me, I have all these resources. I have technology, insulin, shots. If I were born 150 years ago, I probably wouldn't be here. So
Yeah. Oh, that's an amazing way to look at it.
I know I really try to every morning because yeah, there's going to be hard days and my blood sugar is not going to be perfect all the time, but knowing that no matter what, I have insulin, I have shots, I am here, like I'll be fine, it's all fine, just
Yeah.
totally helps me. And in my meditations and when I exercise too, it just also just totally helps with that brain fog that I can sometimes get. My last one would be for me, this is just has been very personal, but no matter what you're going through, if it's depression, anxiety, find a good doctor or therapist that you really like and trust. Because for me, I used to think like, and I'm not in denial, I was the problem for a long time. But I used to be like, why am I not like connecting to this doctor? Like, it didn't feel right to me. So trust your intuition and your gut. If you feel like you're in this place in your life where you need some help or you just need to talk to somebody or you don't feel like you quite trust or connect with your doctor, find a new one. And that has been huge for me when I moved to Minneapolis. He is the cutest. Like, he is such a nerd. He has these big glasses. Oh God, I probably shouldn't. Am I allowed to say this? I
Yes.
won't say his name. Okay.
It's
I,
only him, but if it's vice versa, your doctor talking about you, you can go to your doctor. Dork.
Lord knows I'm not a doctor, but okay, God, I had to check with my professional over here. Um, but he is seriously the sweetest. And for me, I found just with my personality, it meshes so well with him. I like want to do well because I want to make him excited about my numbers. And
Yeah.
just you got
Oh,
to do
that's
what feels right to you.
right. Even if it takes 20 doctors to get through.
Oh my God, I thought my mom was gonna disown me for a while, but
That is a lot, but I'm proud of you because that's persistence right there.
yes. So with
Hmm.
anything, sometimes you have to be a little more persistent. We've both
Yeah.
been there with many things in our life.
You give some really, really good tips, and I feel like a lot of people will benefit from this. You're
Yeah.
right. Even if they don't have type 1 diabetes, it's so relatable to so many things. Any chronic illness, really any type of stress or something that you feel like you deal with every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The biggest thing is just talking about it. Don't let it build inside and don't just like say, oh, everything's fine. Like that's literally how I lived for so long. Well, my blood sugar levels were on average. So, like I said, normal is between 80 and 150. And in high school, in college, I was very sick. Like my numbers were constantly in the 300s to 400s. And I'm not
Um,
sitting here being like, oh, I've always been perfect. But knowing that once I started talking about it, everything in my life just started to feel so much better. So, whatever you're going through, you have friends in us, we got you.
yes.
Or
Yeah.
find somebody in your own life that you can confide in, and it just
Right.
makes
And if you
the
can't
world.
find anybody in your life, like I'm sure you can find some sort of support group because being connected with the struggles is the most important thing to make you feel not alone in it. Because I promise you, whatever you're going through, you're not the only one who's ever gone through it. So many times we can feel like we are because we don't talk about it. And so we think that we're alone in it, but there's always somebody else out there that is going through literally the exact same thing that you're going through right now, no matter how bad it is.
Oh
And
my,
that always brings comfort knowing that, but you just have to remember that somebody is going through it.
yes. And that is seriously like you just hit the nail on the head, Monty. That is exactly it. And last thing I want to add to is my mom, when I was little, she used to be like, Claire, there's these like diabetic camps you can go to. And I'd be like, Mom, I am not sleeping in a tent with like a bunch of diabetics. And now I literally wish I would have, because I probably would have had a completely different outcome. No regrets, but I hope these tips kind of, you can take them and use them however you need to in your own world. Know we're
Yeah,
here for you.
and share this episode with anybody that you think would benefit from it, especially anybody dealing with type 1 diabetes, because that sounds like a bitch. I don't know how you deal with it.
Uh,
Humans are so resilient too that I know it's just one of those things, like you don't have a choice, so you just learn to adapt.
yep. And
And you're
that,
so much stronger for it.
yep. You just accept it and then plan accordingly about how you want to live with it. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm excited because next week I get to interview Monny, and our roles are reversed. Mon's a badass ER nurse and sees all the things. So I can't wait to interview you next week.
Yeah, well, that wraps it up. Like we said, share it with anybody that you know who might be dealing with some sort of chronic disease, especially type 1 diabetes, or really any sort of daily struggle. This can be useful.
Yep.
Give us a thumbs up if you liked this video, and make sure you subscribe so that you can hang out with us every Sunday.
Yeah. We hope to see you next Sunday.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Monny.